And I need to turn this volume down a little bit. My name's Dwayne, and I'm here because I care about the truth. We are standing here together because we all share one common belief, that the time has come to send a message to Washington, D.C. that we must give the truth an opportunity to prevail. We must let our elected officials and elected representatives and our appointed officials know that now is the time to act. Now is the time to shed the bright light of truth on the darkness and the corruption. And now is the time to wake America up from the nightmare that has been the Trump administration. As I was debating what to say today, I was thinking about the significance of truth and politics. Now, some cynics might say they're like oil and water. They really don't mix under any circumstances. But then I asked myself, when has truth actually been used to right the wrongs in this country? When has truth been used to prevail in the past? And why do we have to demand it now? Why is that so important? And if we are indeed facing a nightmare, then what can truth do to help us to wake up from it? I want to answer that question today with two examples of truth seekers from Pennsylvania that can give us all courage and confidence in the present, and maybe some hope and some kind of hope for our future. They had faced nightmares of their own and used truth to overcome things to come to a better day. My first example of truth is truth through science. This is a much needed form of truth. Especially considering Trump's recent decision about the Paris Climate Accord this week. By the way, Trump thought he was so clever that the words Pittsburgh and Paris both started with the letter P. I mean, it was like an episode of Sesame Street brought to you by the letter P, wasn't it? Right? Well, Mr. President, last time I checked, Paris and Pittsburgh were both on this planet. And that starts with the letter P. And by the way, so does the word popular vote. So, the loser, right. So, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection State Office Building, which is not far from where we are here right now, is named after Rachel Carlson. Yeah, Rachel was from Springdale, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. And in 1962, Rachel Carlson published a book called Silent Spring. You know it, right? It was a damning expose on the harmful effects of the pesticide DDT. Her book detailed with scientific rigor the damage that the chemical was doing to life in all of its forms. She invoked truth to explain how human lives are being threatened by this chemical, and used her book to paint a nightmarish picture of an America that failed to act on the truths that she revealed. She was challenged widely for her staunch adherence to truth, and she was dismissed by some because she was a woman. She was dismissed by some because she was an environmentalist, and she was dismissed by others just because she threatened their profit margins. She was called a communist, a propagandist, and a soft scientist. Carlson knew what she was up against. In the introduction to Silent Spring, she wrote about the political environment she was facing, which echoes much of what we're facing today. She wrote, quote, "When the public protests, it's fed little tranquilizing pills of half-truth. The public must decide whether it wishes to continue on the present road, and it can only do so once it is in full possession of the facts." She added, in the words of Gene Rustin, "The obligation to endure gives us the right to know." The obligation to endure gives us the right to know. Shortly after the book was published, President John F. Kennedy created a commission to investigate pesticides, and just a few years later, because of her important work exposing the truth, DDT was banned. What Rachel Carlson did 50 years ago, we must do today. She used the truth to challenge norms. She called upon the truth to improve our world, and she evoked the truth to shed light in the darkness. And importantly, she didn't do it alone. As you know, Silent Spring is often cited as the sparking of the modern environmentalist movement. That's a powerful legacy for truth. And that's what we're here for today, to demand the truth. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. All right. Okay. About 5 years ago, a Pennsylvanian from Saxon spoke at Capitol Hill about the need for contraception to be covered by all employers, regardless of their religious affiliation or their beliefs, by the Affordable Care Act. She brought truth with her to that hearing, citing documented costs of contraceptions, documented statistics about the impact of those costs on women, documented polling supporting her position. She brought stories of truth and desperate medical concerns which were being jeopardized by the Republican ideological posturing, a nightmare from which they needed to be awakened. That woman, Sandra Fluke, who graduated from Georgetown University, was much like her fellow Pennsylvanian, Rachel Carlson. She was demonized for her opposition, for speaking truth for her cause. Her testimony served as a precursor to the kind of political negotiations and compromises that marked the best in American lawmaking. And today, her truth-telling remains an ongoing touch point in the larger public debate. In fact, a year after she was on Capitol Hill, Georgetown began offering health care that covered contraception. The truth made a difference. And that's why we're here today. We're here to join the legacy of Pennsylvania. We're here to join the legacy of people who have committed to demanding truth and exposing the truth. Say it with me now. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. Let me end with this. Last year was probably one of the strangest years any of us can remember, and Netflix released the show appropriately called Stranger Things. If you saw it, you might remember that there was this upside down world. It was a place like our own, but much darker and mysterious and nightmarish. And many of us see the Trump administration in this way. We recognize the White House. We recognize the presidential seal, Air Force One, the markers of the presidency, but it's a nightmarish version of those things, cloaked in darkness, inhabited by monsters, and inherently frightening. In the show, many of the citizens refused to acknowledge the horror that existed and that it might even devour their loved ones. They often ignored warning signs, they dismissed those who had personal experiences with the nightmare, and they continued to live their daily lives as if nothing had changed. They normalized it. The only way these disbelievers eventually were brought to see the horror was through being confronted with undeniable truths. Okay, so to wake up from the nightmare, we must first expose it in full. We must see what it looks like. We must understand how it's put together. And only then can we begin to take it apart and restore the sanity and the comfort, and to infuse hope and progress and restore truth to its rightful place in our democracy. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. Okay, this is the duty of each and every one of us here today, to commit ourselves to exposing the truth of our current nightmare, to draw on the examples of fellow Pennsylvanians like Rachel Carlson and Sandra Fluke, and likewise to find ways to speak the truth to power, waking us up from our collective nightmare. We must also task our elected officials, who must act diligently and swiftly to use their power to find truth and to, the truth of our nightmare, and to help wake us up to that truth so that this country can prevail once again. One last time. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Truth. When do we want it? Now. Okay, let's go forward and let's get it for the people.
Thank you, Dwayne.